So, you have your mission, vision, and values. Now you've got all of this information, and you need to synthesize it into some strategic priorities for your organization and identify those things. You can call them strategic priorities or objectives, whatever you may want to call them. The thing is, they need to fit in a box that is surrounded by mission, vision, and values. If they aren't aligned with your mission, vision, and values, they're not the right strategic priorities. So you have to make sure that it's in line. If your part of your mission, vision, and values is to serve Jesus Christ, and something is out of line there, it's not going to be the right thing to be doing. I would suggest in coming up with strategic priorities and objectives that you have no more than 12. 9 is fine, but no more than 12, because you want to focus in on a few things. Maybe you can boil it down to 3 to 6. But strategic objectives are, again, a statement that synthesizes some of the different things that you're learning. That you can put them in one sentence or phrase, and again, all-encompassing statements that cover they're a broader description of where you're going. Quote from Charles H. Spurgeon: growth can be painful, change can be painful, but nothing is as painful as staying stuck somewhere where you don't belong. And I think that motivates a number of us for trying to put together a strategic plan. We don't want to be stuck. We don't want to be the old mom and pop organization that one time many missions were, and some still are. So to not be stuck is important. Okay, we've done the assessment. We've got some design with the strategic plan. Now we're going to begin to build things out. And those, from our strategic priorities, we come up with the targets, goals, and initiatives. And here we get even more specific. And many of you have seen this, I'm sure, on SMART goals. They need to be specific, they need to be measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So, for instance, and I'll have another illustration here a little bit later, but if you come up with a strategic priority that says we want to be good stewards, the specific goal that might come out of that is that we are going to become members of ECFA. When we become members, that's a measurable quantity. Yes, we are members. It is attainable. We have an outside audit, and we can meet all of the criteria. It's realistic for us, and we're going to do it by August of this year. And hopefully that's a realistic goal to get through everything. So those are things that are going to affect those specific goals that you have or targets. Again, all of your target goals go back to your mission, vision, and values. All of your program goals, individual goals, because each of your staff can have goals that they are going to accomplish that relate to some strategic priority. They need to be aligned with mission, vision, and values. Here's a fictitious rescue mission. The name has been changed to protect the guilty here. They came up with a one-page scenario just to highlight where they were going, to give to their board, to give to some funders, that outlined their mission, vision, and values. It didn't get into a lot of detail, but that they were God-centered, people-empowered, service-oriented. Their vision was to rebuild, restore, and renew lives. Then they had their strategic objectives, and they used, in this particular case, that balanced scorecard to divide it up into 4 areas of their constituents' perspective or customer perspective, their financial perspective, internal perspective, and what they described as organizational perspective, which was that learning and growth side. And they had goals in each one of those. So, to broaden the revenue mix was something that came out. Everybody was saying we need more money. Anybody here need more money? So that was something that came out. And then they put together one of their goals, or you could describe them as measures, because they are something that's going to be measured, was to increase the number of donors. And they had a specific target of 10% per year. They were a younger organization, and they had a lot of potential for growth. So that was a realistic goal for them to increase.
That would be a difficult goal.
Yeah. Yeah, 10% is quite a gap, but they were in a situation where it was realistic. So, but it was at the top probably, so that they were stretching. But they were young enough. And this particular organization had a, where was it? They talk about revenue mix because they were dependent upon their thrift stores to an extent of almost 75% of their budget was from their thrift stores, and they knew they needed to change that. And they just hadn't tapped into their donors the way that they could. So they were identifying that and going to get busy on that. So, but you come up with those goals, measures, initiatives, and then set your target on that. And this was a way. This did not cover everything by a long shot, but it was a one-page deal that helped the board not get too deep into the details, but to understand and to view where they were going. And then they put together a dashboard off of this that they could report to the board when the board met quarterly about how they were doing on some of these different things. And they used a red light, yellow light, green light way of showing it on the dashboard that things that come to a stop, we need some help here, or things are going great, or we're watching this one, so it's on the yellow caution kind of thing. Now, I don't want to forget about this. This is the most important aspect in a lot of ways. Strategic priorities, planning, and management will not replace, but heighten trust in Jesus. You can't do it yourself. You need to have the focus on Christ and depend upon Him. So strategic planning is important. And you begin to realize that Christ wants to even do more as you take a look at some of those goals and stretch. He can go beyond the stretches of things. We're reminded in a capital campaign, and I'm sure you've had situations where we had identified a donor that we thought, maybe his family will give $35,000 to this one of these rooms that we're doing in this renovation. So my job was to approach him, and he looked, shaking his head, and he says, "Do you think you could put about 2 or 3 of these rooms together? I think we'd like to fund about 3 of them." So it was a stretch further than what was expected, but trusting Jesus and looking what He wants to do. And the best strategic priorities planning management begins on your knees. You can have a lot of information and you can have everything else, but the place to start is on your knees. This was another way that they presented some of the information. These are sort of the objectives that they put over in these areas, and they relisted them over here, like changing lives was one of them. You can't read from back there, I wouldn't think. But one of the measures they said about changing lives is we're going to share success stories. That's something that we're going to do. And so we're going to do that monthly. And so they hadn't, over in initiatives or other things over here on their action plan, to write the testimony of somebody whose life has been changed. The resource is going to be John, who's in the development department, and his projected completion date is going to be August 31st, and you can even put in a budget kind of thing and get down to that detail in a strategic plan as well. So this was just another way to lay it out on an Excel spreadsheet. Who does what? On strategic priorities, for really determining and the final approval, that's the board's responsible. The staff and the consultant, if you use one, or volunteer support, is going to suggest the things to the board, but it's the board's responsibility to say, okay, these are in line with our mission, vision, and values. These are going to be our strategic priorities going into the future years. I didn't talk much about timing, but 3 years is the common strategic plan at this point. You know, some people used to have 5 and 10 years, but we had a good example in COVID of how quickly things can change sometimes, and so you need to have an ability to flex. And I like the idea of a 3-year plan with the idea that every year then you're completing a year and you're preparing the next years out there, so that you've always got a 3-year in advance you're looking to, and it just keeps rolling along, that at an annual meeting you're working on the following year's plan. The strategic priorities, targets, and goals, staff leadership is responsible, but the board members may be critical volunteers in helping to flesh some of those things out, so they're a part of that as well. Then in the operational planning, the staff is responsible with some board support, but the staff is going to know better some of those targets that they need to meet. So then you build all of this out with some of these different targets, and it's a living document. So you need to be able to have it in such a way that everybody can understand what's going on, and those that need to know in a particular department or whatever it may be can really see it and understand. And so that's where the management of it comes in. And that phase is perhaps one of the most important. You end up with those strategic priorities and you have those target goals, but then those goals come down to the programs in the department that you have, and those break down into individual goals. You know, it's going to be your responsibility, Chris, to do that event that is being planned, that is going to meet the goal of PR that relates to the getting the word out in the strategic priority or something of that sort. So your individual goal comes out and is connected with the strategic plan. In managing that is the people issue. Every person in your organization needs to have an action plan that ties in with that strategic plan so that they understand what they need to get done. And they feel part of the whole in that. And it expresses their ownership and accountability for what they need to get done when. Having a system. You can track and manage the performance of how you're going on the strategic plan. Now, how you're going to do that, a software system, a spreadsheet, whatever it looks like, to gather data on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. And everybody needs to be on the same system. You don't have this person using that to track things and that person using this. So pulling all of that together, you need to get your data processing, your tech people involved in how to do that. The process, you need to schedule at least monthly or quarterly reviews of the performance that you're going on a strategic plan. Without that, all of this is just good ideas on paper. You've got to be looking at it regularly. Again, the reason for having those kind of processes and that kind of system that everybody gets on the same page. The board, the staff, everybody else. And you have the communication going on about that, and you know what you're focused on. You have accountability to each other, up and down the chain. It goes both ways. As CEO, I always felt I had an accountability to my staff and to help them to respond about their needs and to get done what I was supposed to get done, and they needed to let me know if I wasn't good enough for them to do, and they had the freedom to do that. One of the things in this that I think needs to be a mindset of everybody, and it's hard to sometimes get this across, but it helps in the process. And this comes from a book called Lean Startups for Social Change, and it's the textbook for a class on social entrepreneurship that City Vision University has, commercial. So I wish I had taken that course about 40 years ago. I took it about a year ago, but I wish I'd had it 40 years ago, because there were just an awful lot of things that were applicable to starting a project, starting a business, starting a new program that we wanted in the mission. And it started out with, okay, we know of something that we want to build. We think we need this, and we identified sort of a MVP, a minimum viable product. What is the minimum that we need to start with and do in this? A little bit like the idea that I've talked to some missions lately that opened up a new women's shelter. But while they had rooms and beds for 40 people, they only opened it up for 3 people initially, because they wanted to test everything. They wanted to understand that their systems were working right. And so they were going to start with that minimum viable product, so to speak. They were going to measure things. They were going to collect the information and the data. They were going to be learning from that. Okay, what went wrong? What do we need to do differently? And in some cases, they would pivot. They would make a change so that the program would be better. They would improve, and they would build on that. And this kept happening. And with a strategic plan, these kind of things keep happening too. And that's why I describe it as a living document, that you need to look and see, is it working the way you really want it to? Developing a strategic plan is a complicated, time-consuming project, to say the least. And when you're going to take it on, you need to realize that, but it is well worth the time and effort in doing it. The options that you have, do it yourself. You may have a board member who's just a great individual. I was talking with the mission this past week that their board chair, the CEO says, man, did she get us on track? Because she had really been involved in strategic planning in her organization, and she brought it to our board, and we really feel like we're focused now. And so she went through the process with them. Sometimes you can find volunteers. I never cease to be amazed learning about what the talents and abilities of our volunteers were for the mission. And in one particular case, there was a fellow that came in to do some volunteer work that was way below his level, and I got to talking with him. And this was a fellow that was in Lancaster, and he was head of all of the operations of Armstrong Flooring in Lancaster. And so he managed all of the plans. He oversaw every bit of that. He had been tasked by the CEO, because it was a time when the flooring industry was going through a radical change, with coming up with a plan for the future, which he put together that strategic plan, which as a part of it, he eliminated his own job because he thought it would be best for the company overall, and he divided things up differently and all of that. But he understood what strategic planning was all about. So we were able to, have him help us in that process. So volunteers are a possibility. Hiring a consultant to lead you through is another thing that you can do. Sometimes there is greater potential for insights that you may not have, because they may see aspects of your organization that you didn't realize, or they may relate to you. Okay, you've got a problem over here, and you need to figure out how you're going to deal with it, because this came out. Choose carefully, though. Do your homework, check references, check other people if you're going to go that particular route. Sometimes you can combine it with the capital campaign and your campaign consultants. So that's another route. I'm sure Pat McLaughlin from the group would be glad to help you with that. One warning, though. Their focus tends to be more on fundraising and less on program development sometimes, because that's their thing. So it's sort of natural that that's the case. So, and that's not to say that they don't do a good job in helping you walk through and using your strengths in program development to do it. So that's another alternative too. And there's a couple other vendors out there, I think, that are related to walking you through some strategic planning. So it is a big task. I've got some references at the end of the slides, and bibliography and some resources that are available to you too. So thank you. You've been very attentive. I appreciate that. If I can do anything to help, pick up one of my cards or get in contact with me. Again, I would say how God knows what's going on. And in that planning process, He already knows where you should be going. You just need to get in touch with Him, and He's gonna work it out. The coat of arms of the McMillen clan from Scotland established their motto in something like 1300. We learn to provide relief to the distressed. When I was searching for my purpose in life and trying to plan what I was going to do in years to come, and I've been praying about it for months, Lord, what really needs to be my vision? And I wandered into a Scottish shop, and I came upon this motto for the McMillen clan. And I said, I'm in the right kind of work. God knew that in advance, and He had a plan. I just needed to get on board. Right? For your mission, God has a plan. You just need to figure it out, get on board, and let Him stretch you. Get you out of your comfort zone sometimes, and do what He really wants to do. That's it. I'm way ahead of my quit time, so questions?
What's the question?